Hey dreamers, this is Anisha Jennings, a fellow immigrant and an entrepreneur. From being an engineer in India to building my tech business in the US, I've lived the journey you're on. Welcome to Your American Dream podcast, where we turn immigrant challenges into superpowers. Are you feeling out of place, struggling with a job hunt, or simply missing home? I've been there, and I'm here to guide you through it. In each episode, we'll dive into real stories, practical advice, and mindset that will help you write your unique success story. From navigating cultural differences to building a purposeful life, I've got you covered. So if you're ready to turn your immigrant experience into your greatest strength, let's dive in. Your American dream starts now. Welcome to Your American Dream. I'm Anisha Jennings, and today I'm honored to welcome Terri Huggins Hart, an award-winning journalist, editorial consultant, and fierce advocate for access, equity, and inclusion. Terri has spent over 15 years contributing reported stories and personal essays to national publications covering personal finance, leadership, mental health, maternal health, travel, and the intersections of identity across it all. She brings her lived experience as a mother, a disability advocate, and storyteller into every space she enters. She helps professionals breathe life into their work through self-exploration and also being a fitness expert. Welcome, Terri. Thank you so much for being here today and taking the time to be here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really nice to speak with somebody else who understands the entrepreneurial spirits, business, motherhood, and navigating immigrant life and culture.
For sure, for sure. So tell us how your journey started. Like, what was it like, your early life, and how did you navigate to where you are today?
My early life, you are asking professionally or personally?
Whichever you're comfortable sharing.
Okay, I could share a bit of both. We can say, to stay on topic and on brand with, the whole immigrant life, I could say my early life was actually quite confusing. And I say that because I'm actually not an immigrant. However, I am a child of immigrants. So my parents, they were born and raised in Trinidad, immigrated to the United States where I was born.
Mm-hmm.
So I am very proud of my Trinidadian culture. I'm also a very proud American most times. But that's a whole other topic. But considering my bicultural identity, it was very confusing growing up because I usually felt like I was never really American enough, nor was I Black enough or Trinidadian enough. So I didn't really fit into any space.
Right.
A lot of things are different now.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about these things a lot more openly now. However, back then in the early 90s, people didn't really talk about it much. So I didn't have the language. So I knew I didn't really fit in a lot of places. I felt very confused, but I didn't have the language for it.
Right.
And then you add the fact that I was a child. So that was my early life. It wasn't until I got a bit older and actually till I got to college years that it started to click. And I realized like, wow, I'm an American born woman, but I was really raised as a Trinidadian because that's how my parents, grew up. So
Right.
when I was finally able to see it for myself and express it, I felt a lot more comfortable in my skin, to say the least.
Right.
But it was something that I saw once I got to college. And in all honesty, I had more Black friends because I grew up in a predominantly white area. So that added to the confusion that I had.
Yes. Yes. Makes sense. Yes. So you got into journalism. Tell us a little bit about that. And now you advocate for the Black and parenting communities and the disabled. So how does that journalistic journey come into your advocacy now?
So I got into journalism because I was always the kid getting into trouble asking all the wrong questions. Yeah, I'm sure you could probably relate. You're raised being told like children should be seen and not heard.
Yes.
And I think that's true for a lot of children, but especially I think when you come from an immigrant family, that
Yes.
like talking back was a no, asking the question, like, no, it's like what I say goes and that's it. But that was me as a kid. And, into adult years, it kind of worked out well for journalism, asking all the
Correct.
questions
Yes.
that you may think you're not supposed to ask, but sometimes you do need to ask them for critical thinking purposes to get more clarity. to just better understand the situation and someone's background. So that's how that started for me as I went to college for journalism through asking all the questions and covering different things like maternal mortality, especially in the Black communities, disability access. That's how I really felt very passionate about these areas in the real world. So I started volunteering for different organizations. I was once a big sister in the Big Brother, Big Sister program. I advocate for paid leave in New Jersey. I do a lot with that work. So but a lot of it started from asking the right questions to the right people and hearing other people's lived experience and stories.
For sure. Love that. I love that you did all, you have a contribution towards all that. And it's so important because, like you've been talking about, maternal health, and it's so important after the baby for your recovery. So thank you for that. So tell us a little bit about, how did becoming a mom change your life? And how did that, transition into your entrepreneurship and your life as a business owner?
How does motherhood not change your life? It changes your life in every way. And I'm not even sure that there's words to describe it all.
For sure.
But I can say that becoming a mother has helped me be more flexible in some things. I've noticed you try to be very rigid. You have your schedule. You're like, it has to go like this, X, Y, and Z. And becoming a mother helped me realize, like, you know what? You don't run this. You don't run this at all. So you just got to take it day by day. And honestly, when that's too much, 10 minutes at a time. Take it
Right.
10 minutes at a time. And that's what motherhood has taught me. And I try to remind myself of that every day. Like, you know what? 10 minutes at a time. I don't have to have it all figured out right now.
Right.
Just
Right.
10 minutes.
Yes, for sure. So I think you're a good person to ask this question to because you work
Mhm.
with, maternal health and mental health. You know how there's always this, I think I read it somewhere, it's called grandparent dementia, something like that, where they are like, oh, we were mothers too. We did this thing too. And there's a comparison. We did it. Why is it so difficult for you? And we have this comparison of which is not so much these days. It's like, as the awareness has grown, people are more understanding, more helpful, cooperating. But there's this thing that's still there, like a taboo sort of, like, we did it. We raised 5 kids, we raised 6 kids. What is going on? Like, what's the hard part? So can you shed some light on that topic?
There there's two sides to that. One, yes, our grandparents, our parents before us had it hard,
Yeah,
and we did too. I think we one have to recognize that your hard does not erase somebody else's struggle and
for
vice
sure.
versa.
Yes.
So that's number one. I think also we need to remember that, especially with immigrant families and people of color, they seem to value hard work.
Yes.
And don't get me wrong, hard work is, you need to know when to do it. However, that does not mean everything needs to be hard.
Right.
And that's the difference between the generations. That generation has been conditioned to believe that if it's not hard, it's not worth it.
Right.
It's got to be hard. We're now coming into this time like, no, life is not supposed to be hard. Like, why am I struggling every single day? So it is okay to welcome ease. So it's the different mindset between the generations. Don't get me wrong. That does not mean that we should expect everything to always be easy,
Right.
whether it's in business, whether it's in parenthood or whatever. However, there should be an expiration date on, the hard. It should
Right.
not be hard forever. If it's hard every day, all day, that means something needs to change.
Right.
And
Right.
I think we as a generation, have accepted that and that's what we grew up knowing. Meanwhile, the older generations, they don't necessarily subscribe to that.
Right, right. I love that. I love that perspective. And I wanted to clarify when I said grandparents' dementia, I read it in an article. It's not coined by me. But what they meant to say is um, as as you grow, that struggle part just becomes like a distant memory. And so now you're like, it's like, okay, I like, how they say women are conditioned to forget the labor and the delivery
Okay.
part so they can have multiple children and not live with that. Well, it's different for each woman, but what that means is that they have struggled but they got through it, and now they see your life being easier than what they had it. So that is a distant memory, And so
Right.
they're like, we did it too, so why can't you do it? So that's what that article was about. So thank you for clarifying that. A perspective about hard does not always have to be hard. So, what responsibility do you think media and storytellers have when covering marginalized communities?
Ooh, I love that question. The responsibility they have, one, is to question their intent.
Hmm.
Because sometimes the media, they like to prioritize the story more than the or more than the people behind it. They prioritize the story, but they forget that there are people behind it. So they may be coming in with these generalizations that they may not even realize that they harbor. So when you are questioning or interviewing anybody in let's say, an immigrant community or a person of color, we need to be mindful of their experiences and be mindful of the biases that you may have when you ask certain questions. You don't want to project in
Right.
those questions. So that's definitely one of the responsibilities that you have in the media. Do you want, I
Keep
can go
going.
on.
Yes, keep going.
So one example is that sometimes when you are reporting a story, especially let's say we're talking about fatherhood and somebody's talking about how fathers today are a lot more involved than fathers of yesteryear. And some reason they include some statistic in there saying, and 3% of Black families are single parents or whatever. And you have to question, why is that statistic relevant to this story? If we're talking about how involved parents are, why are you deciding to include this statistic saying that, X amount of Black parents, are they're single families? And it may be relevant in some context, but you also have to ask yourself, are you including that because of your own biases? Because there is that media, that generalization that Black men are absentee fathers.
Hmm.
So you have to ask yourself, that's where you have to be responsible for your own biases
Right.
and, the culture behind it and not just the story, what's going to get the clicks.
Right, right. Sometimes, there's like media scare and they're like, okay, this is going on, that is going on. And how do you try, like, what would be your advice on how do we vet what is a good source of information and how do we, take it all in without being scared, but being informed and aware to make sure we're doing the right thing, but at the same time, not panic so much that we then just, go into a spiral. What would be your advice?
Yes. First of all, this is such an important question, especially now because there's so little trust in the media. Media literacy is an all time low. And unfortunately, usage of AI is at an all time high in the wrong places. So I really appreciate that question. To answer it, one, to make sure that you manage all that you're consuming, I would, one, maybe set a period of time in your day that you want to take in information
Right.
and maybe limit it to a specific topic because there's a lot going on, whether it's ICE raids, the taxes or just everything,
Yes,
tariffs, everything going on. And it's impossible for one person to keep track of all of it.
for sure.
You're going to get overwhelmed. And that's exactly what they want. They want you to get overwhelmed so you become, just frozen. So you can't
Right.
do anything.
Right.
Maybe pick one thing that you really care about, that you think this is what aligns with me. Learn as much as you can about that. That's what you follow. But make sure you follow it at a time that you are in a good mental space to take in that
Right.
information.
Right.
Maybe early in the morning, you are so cranky, you're looking, you're like, oh my God, I don't want to go to work today. Maybe that's not the time for you to go watching the news or reading the newspaper.
Yes.
Maybe instead the best time is like during your lunch break or whatever. So you need to be mindful of your state of mind. When are you more receptive to information where you can properly, funnel that through your thoughts and actually take it in and understand. So that's one. And then making sure that you are getting legitimate information. So it's a very difficult question to answer because unfortunately, even some well-respected organizations are using AI.
Yes.
So I wish I can tell you there was like one foolproof way,
Yes.
but I'm usually mindful of organizations that get direct quotes from places. So sometimes you may read a story from, I don't know, let's say your local newspaper, and it says, according to a report from, New York Times, X, Y, and Z did this.
Right.
And while that may be accurate, it's actually better if you got the quote yourself instead of
Right.
quoting another publication. So you want to be mindful of those things. You also want to look out for the ones that have clickbait headlines that are very, very long. You can tell there are just some headlines that, the story may be accurate, but it may be written in a way to just rile you up.
Right. Right.
So you want to be mindful of like the trigger words and headlines.
For sure.
I'm trying to think of one off the top of my head.
That's okay. And also not to take things personally, like it's against you alone. It's more like it's something that is necessary, or just like you have a system at home and you do things in a certain way for your home to be safe. And that's pretty much
Yeah.
how things, like not to take things personally, basically, and to evaluate everything as a
Yes.
case by case and not feel like, oh, I'm targeted. I'm targeted. That just doesn't
Right.
make sense.
Right. And, I'll add another thing. Something that a lot of media outlets may do is give you a percentage without a number.
Right.
And it's not necessarily wrong, but it doesn't always tell the whole story.
Yeah.
So, an example, let's say there was a 50% increase of people, let's say, losing their jobs. Actually, I don't want that because that's a big number. But
Yes.
say there's a 50% increase of people who decided that they were going to stop drinking soda.
Okay.
Fine.
Yeah.
50% increase. That sounds like a lot.
It does.
But they may not tell you that it was just one other person before. It's just another. So really the total was 2.
Right. Right. That makes so much sense.
So you need to know the number. And that was like a horrible example about soda, but you get my point.
Okay, I get the point. And that's important, is to not just like take everything, word to word and then just, panic about it, but to take everything with a grain of salt and see how it applies to you. So thank you for sharing that. So you've cross-pollinated industries from finance to wellness to maternal health. How did you give yourself permission to evolve professionally?
I love this question. I evolved professionally because I realized that you're allowed to live more than one identity in this lifetime. And we do it all the time, whether or not you realize it. You start off as an identity as like a child, then you're a teenager, then you're adult, then you're maybe a wife, a mother, a student, whatever. So that alone is proof that you are allowed to live multiple identities in one lifetime. So you go where your life follows. And that's how I felt about my career. I went where my interests followed. I went where my life followed. And it's worked out well because I'm allowed to feel fulfilled in so many different aspects of my life.
Yeah.
I'm still allowed to channel that curiosity and asking the questions that maybe I would have gotten in trouble for as a kid. And I joke with my parents about that all the time. I'm like, if you guys were successful in, letting me believe that children should be seen and not heard, I would not have a career. So you should be proud of yourselves for failing in that aspect.
Oh, I love the perspective. That's awesome.
That's how I was able to evolve, especially when you realize that all this stuff is connected in so many ways. Personal finance dictates, maybe where you can afford to travel. Your culture dictates where you feel safe traveling.
Right.
Whether you're pregnant helps you, dictates what your finances are and when you can travel, or, so it's all interconnected. So it made the transition and going between writing and exploring all the topics so much easier.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that. So you have these different identities, which is like dancer, fitness instructor, empath, speaker. What have these different identities taught you about leadership and communication?
So what has taught me about leadership is that sometimes you need to know when to take a back seat.
So good.
I know a lot just because, from journalism, I am a tireless researcher. However, I hesitate to call myself an expert because I'm always learning. So going into every industry and doing so many things, it's taught me that being a good leader is admitting that you don't know it all.
For sure.
Sometimes you need to let somebody else step in and take over. When it comes to communication, what I really love about all those industries is that they all have their own jargon. And because of that, it's taught me the importance of communication and being explicitly clear in what I mean. Because I can go from, a dance class where everybody knows what arabesque is. That does not mean I can go into teaching a Zumba class and everybody knows what that means.
Right.
They know salsa. They may not know what arabesque is. So I have to explain that, be very clear. Same with, writing. Like you may not know what a deck is.
Right.
But if I go into another space, you may know exactly what it is and you may use a different phrase for it. So all of these different industries has taught me that in communication you have to be explicitly clear,
Yes.
especially because there's no such thing as common sense.
Yes.
I know we always like people love to say, it's common sense. You should know that. But no, there is no such thing as common sense. Common sense is dictated by your gender, your culture, your language, your economic background, your religion,
For
the
sure.
region that you grew up in. That is what your common sense is based on. So there's no such thing as common sense. So I can walk into a room and it may be common for people to know that you shouldn't talk over a certain person if they're standing in front of the room. However, that's a social norm that's dictated by culture and where you grew up. So I can't automatically assume that person is rude. It's up to me to be explicitly clear and communicate what my needs are and what is expected.
I love that. I love that perspective because I see this a lot when, my parents visit and there's certain things that they're like, we didn't know, we're not supposed to do that. Or we're not sure what to do. And same thing for me. When I came here too, I was like, I didn't know this is like even ordering something in a restaurant was like not common sense to me. It was like, why are there all these options? How do I pick? What do I I just want some chicken, but then there's like this kind of chicken, that kind of chicken wrap, chicken sandwich, chicken, whatever. But there's so many options. So like you said, it is a very cultural thing, social norm, where you grew up. So I like that perspective of, common sense is not, it's more like it's like contextual, right? So
Yeah, I mean, common sense is learned. That's really what it is. It's learned, and some people had the access, the privilege, the resource,
right.
the exposure to learn it, and some people didn't. So that means we need to walk into the room and be willing to explain and be very clear and remove all assumptions
I
when
love that.
communicating, because you know there's so many things that dictate how people communicate. I mean, I can even go like since I mentioned like I'm big in disability space. I'm sure you can relate to the fact that in so many cultures, not making eye contact is like the biggest sign of disrespect.
Yes. Yes.
If you're not looking at me the eye, that is the most disrespectful thing. You're not listening to me.
Right.
Meanwhile, some people who are autistic, they don't make eye contact
Yes.
because they can pay attention better when
Right.
they don't look directly at you. But you are making an assumption, say, why are you not paying attention? That's rude. So, that all comes down to, again, it's not common sense. Sometimes it's opening your mind and realizing people communicate in different ways.
Yes, yes. I love that. And it's so true whether, in any form of relationship, like, whether you're a parent child or spouse or friend or business, wherever you are, that is so true that, the way we communicate, if we eliminate assumptions and reduce the ego that okay, I know it all, it's gonna make things so much simpler. So that is amazing. Thank you for that insight. So you help people insert moments of joy into their daily lives. What does that look like? And why is joy often the first thing to go to for high achieving adults?
You know what? Joy, I can't speak for all high achieving adults. And sometimes it's odd to think of myself as high achieving, but I can say joy, it makes things light. That's really and I always say the world around us is heavy enough.
Yes.
Like sometimes you got to make it easy on yourself. Like make it light. So that is why I think joy or why joy is important to me and maybe a lot of other high achieving adults.
So what does that look like? You say you insert moments of joy into people's daily lives. So what does that look like?
So, honestly, I like to lead by example. So what it looks like for me, and actually I don't even know if I had it, like I like to drink sparkling water in a champagne flute. That
Lovely.
is joy for me. And I encourage people to insert more joy instead of making more time for joy because, like, look, our days are packed. We ain't got no time to just suddenly find 10 minutes to, go do something joyful. Sometimes that's impossible,
Yeah.
but you can make your routine as joyful as possible. So for me, that's drinking, sparkling water in a champagne flute.
Yeah.
That's when I clean the kitchen, I light a candle because why not? That's helping people remember that they accomplished something today, whether they realize it or not. And if you didn't realize it, it's probably because you didn't pay attention. Like you've accomplished something. So that is one thing that I love to do, helping people just make everyday moments more enjoyable. Like, because it's a chore, that doesn't mean it has to be the most dreadful thing ever.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's how I feel about it. When it comes to business, I try to have fun, with it. For example, I help a lot of people with their professional bios.
Mm.
We make it fun by one, I like to ask people what their alter ego is. Who's your alter ego? Who do you identify with in a movie? Or, who's your villain? Because a lot of times the villain that you identify with in the movie, that's who you want to be sometimes.
Mm.
That's also because a lot of times the villains in movies they're very misogynist. When you really look back on it, they're really not villains. They were just, women who spoke their mind, and you're like, okay, they were not a villain. So I asked people, what villain do you identify with? Who's your alter ego? And that normally leads us down a discussion of, what their bold professional bio looks like. If you were not afraid of what, your next employer, your next client would say, what would you include in that bio?
Right.
That ends up being a really fun experience. And it allows people to, again, show up in all of their identities, or all the identities they're willing to share with the world,
For
because
sure.
everybody is not always entitled to every side of your life. And that's okay. So I love to bring out that aspect when I help people with their professional bios and their introductions.
Lovely. So tell us a little bit about your business and everything that you do, and how can people work with you?
Yes. So, as mentioned, I do have my background in journalism. I write for different publications, but I'm also an editorial consultant. And that means I help people with a lot of their content, whether it's their blog content, their copywriting, their like newsletters. However, as mentioned, one of my most favorite things to do is helping people with their professional bios and their introductions. Introductions for like maybe something like this, for, a podcast, or what they're going to put in their next let's say they're a speaker on a panel and they need like a little blurb to go in their program,
Right.
or things of that nature. That's one of my favorite things to help people with, because it's so much fun to let people show the many sides of their personality in their bios and make it work for them. So when we do those bios, I help them come up with a bio that works in many different outlets. So whether it's a blog, whether it's, an author page, or maybe you're preparing for a podcast interview, like this. And then you have the call to action. I make sure there's like a call to action if they want one in their bio. So that's one way that people work with me. And then otherwise, I partner with different organizations and I help with their healthcare content because of my background with maternal mortality content, disability access. I do a lot of work helping people in like healthcare communications. So like nonprofits and, medical facilities.
Beautiful. So we were also talking about you being a fitness instructor. Tell us a little bit more about
Yes.
that.
So being a fitness instructor, that I've been teaching Zumba for maybe the last 11 years.
Wow.
And I also used to be a pole dance instructor.
Beautiful.
Yes. So I actually I used to do dance, like the traditional dance, like ballet, tap, all those things when I was much younger. I had a dance minor in college, and then I graduated, with a minor in dance, and I had a major in journalism. And I realized if I actually wanted to live and pay bills, I had to pick one because they were both struggling arts. And I chose journalism. But by the time, after some years, I realized I missed dance, realized I lost all my technique, and I'm like, oh, Zumba. And
Yeah.
I absolutely love it. It is so much fun. I work from home, so I'm normally by myself most of the time. Zumba is it's a fun way for me to get out and see other people, and it's how I keep it light.
Mm.
Because as much as I love, the editorial stuff, it's a lot of thinking. It is very heavy mental work.
Yeah.
Zumba, I can get lost in the music, have a great time. And, I really enjoy it. And the reason I instruct, in all honesty, aside from the fact that I really love it, I know that I actually would not go if I was not teaching.
It's true.
And I say that because, there's so many responsibilities and the guilt is real when you're like, oh man, well, I have this deadline coming up. I really shouldn't go. Or, oh, I really have to cook dinner. Or, the laundry is piling up. I'm not going to go. But once I made it a job, I'm going, well, I have to show up to work.
Yeah.
So that's one of the reasons why I teach Zumba. I know I wouldn't do it any other way.
Right.
And I absolutely love it. I absolutely love it. It's my mental reprieve. And it's one
Beautiful.
of my fun identities.
Yes. So for locals in New Jersey, if they want to come to your workplace and learn Zumba, where is it located and how can they get in touch with you?
Yes. So right now I have a regular class at Princeton University that I teach. Actually, I teach today during their lunchtime session. And then I also teach with the Princeton Recreation Department. So like the township.
Beautiful.
Aside from that, I sporadically teach my own independent classes. So what I'll say is visit my website, terrihuggins.com, or you could send me an email, terri@terrihuggins.com, and I will gladly share the next Zumba class. Or you can reach out if you would like me to teach a class for your group.
Perfect. Thank you so much for sharing that information. What does the American dream look like to you today, personally and professionally?
You know what? The American dream looks like ease and showing up exactly how I need to show up. That is what it looks like. I think before the American dream was, high visibility, high paying jobs and being exactly who your parents want you to be and being exactly who everybody else needs you to be, really, at all times. The American dream is just allowing people the space that they need to show up as they need to. So that means me, if I want to show up as a very confused bicultural Black American child of Trinidad, I mean, that's fine. If that means that I want to show up in a space as a Zumba instructor, that's great too. If I want to show up in the space as somebody who is disabled and maybe can't make eye contact, that's okay. But we need to create the space that people can show up without the shame, without the guilt, without feeling like they are letting somebody else down because they are not living up to what everybody else expected. So that's the American dream. Just ease in being who you are and showing up as you need to be in that moment.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for being here and, sharing your time with us and just giving us all this beautiful perspective, context, and sharing your wisdom with us. Thank you again.
Thank you.
As we close this beautiful conversation with Terri Huggins Hart, I'm reminded that a life and career led with love leaves no room for regret. Terri shows us that when we honor our identities, advocate boldly, and tell stories that matter, we create space for healing and change. If you're ready to bring your own story and mission to life online, I'd love to help you build a platform that reflects who you truly are. This is Anisha Jennings reminding you that your American dream is strongest when it's rooted in truth, joy, and love. Until next time. Thank you for tuning into Your American Dream. I hope this episode left you feeling inspired and ready to take on the world. Remember when I first landed in the US, lost and overwhelmed? Well, look at us now. We're building our dreams together. Your story matters, and I'm so honored to be a part of it. If you enjoyed our chat today, please spread the love. Rate, review, and share. Let's grow this amazing community of dreamers together. Want more? Catch my daily doses of inspiration on my Instagram @JenningsTechCorner. Also check out the show notes for more ways to connect. Remember, your accent is the voice of your ambition. Your background is your superpower. Let's dream big and achieve bigger. Until then, this is Anisha cheering you every step of the way.